Good. Yeah, no, please. We just got on the stage ourselves.
Sorry.
Good to meet you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chandrasekhar.
Rajeev.
Shibayan.
Rajeev.
Major General Singh.
Yeah, of course. We're old friends.
Okay, great. I don't think this mic is working.
Check. Yeah, this is working.
No, that's fine, I guess. Okay, great. Are we going to show the we're going to show the brief video? Mhm. Let me introduce everybody, and why don't you show the I'm told that we have a brief video to show. I don't know how we'll show it on that, but I guess that's for the audiovisual people to make arrangements for. Oh, there.
Probably on that screen, yeah.
This screen?
Yeah, we have two screens over here on the left and the right.
And the left and the right. Okay. In the meantime, thank you, everybody, for coming here. I know on Republic Day and on short notice this is very difficult, but it's good to know that people care about this topic. It's also good to welcome Mr. Chandrasekhar, Major General Satbir Singh, Shibayan Raha, and Preeti Herman here for this discussion. Are we good to go with the movie?
Why don't you just have the discussion? Just start it off and we can do it in a bit.
Okay, we'll do the movie in a bit. I would like this has been done between two organizations. One is the Flags of Honor Foundation, which is set up by Mr. Chandrasekhar, who's in his second term as a Rajya Sabha MP. He's an independent MP who's been supported by all parties. He's had a very distinguished career. He's the son of Air Commander M.K. Chandrasekhar, studied at the Illinois Institute of Technology, and was the founder of BPL Mobile in 1994. In 11 years, this company went on to become a $1 billion company, one of the most successful IT entrepreneurs that this country has seen. And in recognition, I presume, partially of that, in 2007, he became the youngest president of the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry. He is deeply interested in working within the parliament and outside the parliament on issues to do with the armed forces. One of the key issues that he's focused on is voting rights. The Flags of Honor Foundation had a meeting 6 days back with the Election Commission to talk about how we get our 14 lakh military and 9 lakh paramilitary personnel to vote in the elections. Currently, the issue is with that we do it through mail ballot, but there's only 10 days between which the ballot goes to the forward posts and then must be chosen and come back. So for a lot of people, they get by the time they get the ballot, the results are already being announced. So this is ridiculous. It disenfranchises 23 lakh personnel in India, and partially because they're out of station, many of their families also, their wives don't also get to vote. So this has a wide impact on what happens in our political circle. And so it's incredibly important that we discuss this. And on Republic Day, it's a great honor to do that. There are other issues that he's also looked at, including the case of Saurabh Kalia, Lieutenant Saurabh Kalia, who was tortured by the Pakistani armed forces during the Kargil conflict. It's an issue that Mr. Chandrasekhar has raised in Parliament and with the government. He's also talked about tax incentives for corporations that would like to employ former Army personnel. In this, on that note, I'd like to say that my wife at Microsoft was overseeing a program which trained former Javans who'd retired at the age of 35 but weren't trained for skills. So they were effectively unemployed at the most important time of their lives when they had to raise their children, and could not hope to get a better job than as a guard at a mall or something like that, which is not a great future. I will actually, the other people here are Major General Satbir Singh, retired Major General, but I will refer to him as Major General just for in the form of courtesy. There's Shibayan Raha, who works with the Seven Sisters Project, which is a radio show based out of Assam, I think. Yeah, it's for the Northeast generally. And then we also have Preeti Herman, who is the India head of change.org, which is an online petition platform. And one of the petitions that it is looking at is the election issue for soldiers. I'll tell you what the format we will pursue, which is we're going to let each of the panelists speak first. I'm going to begin with Mr. Chandrasekhar, then I will go on to Major General Singh, then I will go on to Preeti Herman, and then I will go on to Shibayan Raha. They will each address their points. After they address their points, I'm going to ask any of the panelists if they have any questions for the speaker. And then we will also take just two questions at that point of time for the audience, for that specific panelist. And we will do that all the way. At the end, we will open it open to all of you. Is that agreeable? I hope that works for everybody. On that note, I'm going to hand it off to Mr. Chandrasekhar. Thank you. Oh, sorry, my name is Umair Ahmed, by the way. I'm here merely to moderate, so I don't necessarily have...
So let me just say from there.
That we can go with the movie and then we'll let Mr. Chandrasekhar speak. Please.
Omer, thank you for that introduction. Happy Republic Day to all of you, and let me join Omer in saying thank you for coming here this evening at short notice. I think the question is a pretty good question. It's an important question. I think some of us who are here probably have asked this question many times, and we've got less than clear answers to that question. But as I was just telling Omer, I think I'm reasonably, and we all should be reasonably comfortable that the answer to that question is yes, we do. Most people do. And I was just telling him again, the first term in Parliament, I spent a lot of time engaging with General Singh and his colleagues in trying to get them to engage with the members of Parliament, and I tried several such meetings and engagements. And the result invariably was, yes, you know, we get it, there are problems and we need to be more sensitive, but. And so nothing really, there was an acknowledged sense of that we need to do something, but there wasn't the pressure on them to go out there and get their political leadership to move. One of the things that we did, at least I did, is in my second term in Parliament, is start engaging with people directly. And I've seen a tremendous response, especially amongst the youngsters. For example, when we did this voting right campaign and the roundtable a few days ago, there was a campaign on social media, and I must have received, and I'm not pulling a number out of a hat, but it's approximately 150, 200 emails from essentially the teens and youngsters saying, how come? How is this possible, and how come nobody has said anything about this so far? So again, I think the answer to this question is yes. But for a long time, we have actually left it, as civil society, left it to the government to, in a sense, engage with the armed forces and do what is necessary for the armed forces on behalf of us. So the civilian engagement, the direct civilian engagement with the armed forces and the people of the armed forces and their families have been, in a sense, really through just, you know, like I said, movies or very inconsistent start-stop kinds of models. And given the fact that we don't have a national military memorial, or we don't have any, let's say, venue or platform for that natural, organic relationship between a citizen and his armed force or her armed force to develop, we've had in the recent times a situation where the armed forces have been, in a sense, and the veterans been treated rather shabbily. And that's not in the visible public domain view of citizens whose armed forces these are. And I think this form of engagement serves to create greater sensitization of the individual citizen, the person himself or herself, about what the armed forces stand for and what really defines the word care. Now, the conventional thing about me standing up for the armed forces is, oh, he's a son of an armed forces officer, and you know, what else is he going to do? He's going to do this. He's not going to support the IAS, or he's not going to support the political class. But that's not really it. I think my sense of service or duty to the armed forces comes a little bit from that. But let me say the bigger point about why we really need to be a lot more focused and engaged on the armed forces. If you just step back a bit and look at government, and you know, you have the broom jhadu phenomenon in Delhi. We have other evidence of people getting fairly troubled and fed up with the political and the bureaucratic class. If you look at it, the genesis of all this is that almost all of the institutions of government, and we engage with different institutions of government at different times in our day or in our lives, have become dysfunctional and have become almost completely political. That's one. The second is the overall debate in our India on anything seems to be driven really by a sense of identity, which is to do with caste, religion, community, region, etc., etc. So even the political definition of a person's identity today is, I am a Kannadiga, or I am a Northeastern or I'm a UPed and therefore I am of this political affiliation. There is very little institutional intervention, there's very little institutional tailwind on the conversation of I'm Indian and therefore these are the things that I need to focus on. Now, if you look at all of what we have in front of us, and you will certainly, I mean, just by a process of elimination, focus on the armed forces as one of the institutions that remains in this sort of chaotic, dysfunctional mess that is the Indian government or the Indian politic, that remains professional and most importantly, still remains focused as with a mission that is nation first or India. There is very little debate in the armed forces today, or at least not visibly outside, about the normal conversations that are today steering mainstream Indian political decision making of caste, creed, region, religion, and so on and so forth. So even if you take the fact that I am a ex-serviceman son or veteran son, or I was a armed forces kid, if you just look at this problem and look at this situation in India and say, look, what are the institutions that we are proud of in an environment where we are completely shameful of most other institutions, you will come down to the fact that the armed forces is that institution. And so many of our young men and women today, even today you go and you see there are so many young men and women who join the forces. And they join it really partly career and all of those, adventure, thrill and all of that. But at the heart of it, it is this concept of national service. And that, unfortunately, is a concept that is diminishing from our discourse and debate. This thing about serving the nation and this thing about public service. The political class that was at one point, post-independence, a good example of what public service and statesmanship were all about, today is anything but that. And I belong to that class, and so I say that with some degree of insight and knowledge into that. Even today, when you see the Gallantry Award winners on 26 January, 10 of them are posthumous. And I tell people this, look, if there is a group of youngsters who join an institution and they do it out of a sense of national service and are willing to put their life and limb on the line for that call of duty, it is remarkable that we as a nation and indeed a billion people don't fate it, encourage it, celebrate it a lot more and remain in a sense detached from it. So I think the question today should be, what do we do? I don't want to sound like this is only about problems, repeating problems, but there are problems. There are some challenges. The fundamental nature of the challenges, like I said, the civil society and citizenship needs to engage with the armed forces directly, and they need to be shaping the political class's approach towards how the armed forces are cared for and not the other way around. Currently, the citizenry are spectators, in a sense, mute spectators to how the political and the bureaucratic class handles the armed forces. I think the reverse should happen, which is that the society at large should say, this is how we want our armed forces to be treated, and you, Mr. Minister, or you, Mr. Secretary, you are just supposed to do what we feel is the right thing to do. So, like I said, and we can discuss this further as we take questions and discuss this, but the current model of the relationship between the armed forces and the government is wrong. It is weakened. It is deteriorating. I think the sooner there is an awakening amongst our citizenry that we need to fix this before the armed forces again goes down the road of every other government institution and becomes something of something that we don't care about or are not proud about. We must intervene and we must shape, in my opinion, that engagement between the government and the armed forces. Thank you again for having me this evening. Thank you.
So I'm just going to ask, well, let me also introduce one other person. Vikas is the person with the mic. He's the one that will go around. He's part of Grassroots India, which is now in its 7th month, and it's doing the interactions between political representatives and people like you. And this is their 9th engagement. They're doing fairly well, I think. So I trust Vikas in this thing. But I want to ask, does any of the participants have a question for Mr. Chandrasekhar to begin with? Okay, then I will ask one question, and then we will take 2 other questions. And Mr. Chandrasekhar, would you like to take them all together?
I can do whatever you
So let's do it that way, so it's more interactive. And my question, as I mentioned, my wife managed this program with the Javans. She isn't here today because, and I'll tell you for one specific reason, because she's Kashmiri. And the reason that she's not here because she's Kashmiri is partly because of not just the fact that how the military has behaved in Kashmir, but how it's perceived to have behaved. And do we care enough about the reputation of our military to hold it up to the highest standards of the Constitution, which is what we celebrate today at Republic Day? Unfortunately, the dismissal of the court-martial in the Patrabal case and the Army's defense in the Supreme Court that under this particular legislation, we can do anything and no case can be, that we are outside the Constitution, is not in line with that. And we need to have a discussion on this. We need to understand why the military needs this, and the public needs to understand that. And the military needs to understand that if the public sees this as a shield, it only undermines the reputation of the military, because there are a lot of honorable serving officers, a number of them who've been my relatives and friends, who I'm incredibly proud of. And their reputations are also damaged by this. I will leave that as a question, but I will now ask Vikas if he wants to take 2 more, or do you want to address that?
You can answer it.
Yep. Okay.
So here's my view on it, and like I said, I on the specific case that you mentioned, I haven't had really the occasion to go through all the facts. But let me say this: I would be absolutely agreeable with your contention that the armed forces, if we are proud of the institution, and which is my entire construct and my premise, that we should be proud of them in how they conduct themselves vis-a-vis law and the Constitution. So there is no, if I've set a gold standard for them as an institution, and that is how I present them to the people of this country, saying this is an organization you should be proud for, then they ought to conduct themselves every which way to make themselves, make everybody proud of them, number one. Number two, but I feel that there is, I completely agree that there is probably a need for a debate. But I don't agree that the debates about AFSPA, or I don't agree that the debates about what protection that they have when they go into conflict region. I think the debate that needs to be had is what kind of political failures cause the armed forces, which by the way is an institution that's trained to wage war. Yes. The armed forces is not a law and order institution. What kinds of political failures cause our political leadership to deploy the armed forces in a sense, putting them in a situation to have to wage war against its own citizen? And I think if you position it from that, then the entire conversation is a legitimate conversation to have. Everything is all on the table, and you can have the discussion. But there is a tendency, and I have friends of mine who are senior political leaders who are on the opposite side of this conversation, who tend to immediately make this a very narrow debate about the armed forces and their accountability and culpability. I would love to have that conversation, and I think anybody who has done wrong in the armed forces must, like anybody else in this country, face the consequences. But I would also like to draw into that net, not as a condition, but I think equally importantly, to understand political conduct, bureaucratic conduct, and all of the other conduct that puts a young major or a young captain in a situation. Look, he's as Indian as anybody else. And I'm actually making the case that he's more Indian than most of us. Putting him or her in a situation where he has to wage war. So I agree that a conversation needs to be had, but I think we really, really owe it to everybody to have the conversation in the correct, complete context.
I think Major General Singh wants to say something.
Can I
as
add
well.
a
Yeah,
little
please,
bit?
please, go ahead.
A very good question which you've asked, but I wish to take a little broader perspective. Very rightly put across by Rajeev Chandrasekhar that very difficult task that the services have to perform, where they have been called to do so when all other administration, all other paramilitary forces or CPOs have not been able to put the situation right. Now, I can only tell you, yes, to say that there is none wrong will be wrong. Well, to say that it is few, I would say that we are a human being and likely to do mistakes or commit wrongs. However, there are very sound system available in the defense services that the action taken is immediately. I can tell you that in the peak of insurgency in Northeast, I have told them that I had 3 postings of 9 years in Northeast. And the last one being in a very, I would say, a position where I was interacting. I was a brigadier administration of the Unified Command, means looking after the whole system. There were 2,740 cases of ill treatment by the civil organizations, police or other civilians, against the women. And there were 14 1-4 in those 2 years' time, 96, 97, when it was peak. Within 6 weeks, all 14 were investigated, 7 were found wrong, 7 were found correct. And those 7 were punished with 7 years to 14 years of rigorous imprisonment. And whereas 2,700 cases where the civilians were involved, not even one case went even up to the court. This analysis has been put across a number of times. I've had one posting in J&K. I assure you that there are a lot of good being done. On a Bihu day, see, we have a festival in North called Bihu. As our own self, we said we will not fire for these 7 days. And we found that one of the officer and one of the Jawan was hit with a bullet from there only, and they were looking at us, me as well as our co-commander. We both went to the hospital and found. What I want to tell you is that we, Army, Air Force, Navy, has such a system of taking care of that. But to say there's none human being, wrong will happen. But how quickly we can address it. In this case, if it is found to be wrong, well, I can assure you, defense services do not save anyone.
We open it up.
Okay, 3 basic rules. Whoever wants to ask question, show of hands. Second thing, try to be specific to the topic because the people doesn't have the facts right now. When we have an open session, we can have the brainstorming session. And third thing, please do introduce yourself when you ask question.
I am Wing Commander C.K. Sharma. A very senior ex-serviceman has just walked out because he's protesting to the fact that the armed forces are being insulted right now. I agree with him. The subject tonight is, do we care for armed forces, not AFSPA? Kindly, if your wife is agreeable to this, let her stay where she is. She's welcome to. But had she felt the courage to come here, would I like to have discussed with her, but this is not the place to discuss it. You're bringing in an extraneous subject unnecessarily. Let's stay, let's focus. Thank you.
So I guess that was a statement. Is there any question? Fine, no issues. Okay, no, that's fine, sir. So just to let you know, sir, there are many civilians also. It's just a question asked, because people don't get to know from the media. I guess we have a question from the gentleman here.
The topic which you have chosen it, that do we care for our armed forces? For the answer for that is very simple, that on 14th February, 4 secretaries of Government of India, they are presenting themselves for a contempt petition, for not doing good to the veterans. Because there is a case which the Supreme Court has given a judgment and they have refused to agree to that. And the 4 secretaries are being presented for the contempt proceedings, and they will carry on sitting there till the time the case is decided. Now coming down to the topic which was just being discussed, my brothers are civilians. I am an only soldier. Why would I take up anything against my own brothers? My family is civilian. One soldier is there in a family. He loves his own fellow beings. They are all civilians. Never anyone does anything. Something happens, he is punished. But some other chap does it, he is not being punished. We as the armed forces people, we all have got, all are our brothers, whether civilian or not, these things. Because he is my nephew, he's a civilian. My brother, my father was a civilian. Everyone is a civilian. There is no distinguish. It's a one family. Why a one brother try to do any harm to the another brother? He does not do. It happens in the crossfire or it happens in somewhere else. I myself have been posted. I have retired after 35 years of service. And I don't find anywhere anyone doing wrong. If it has been done as the general has put across very rightly, that no one is left free. Armed forces is one. Why should we carry a rogue along with us to spoil our own organization? We don't carry rogues. We carry gentlemen. That's why a name is given. Gentleman cadet becomes a gentleman officer and retired as a gentleman veteran. This is the thing. Thank you very much.
I think Nitin Gokhale is in the audience as well. Can we ask him to just intervene? Where? Nitin, sorry.
Just a second, I'm coming.
Sorry, I need to introduce myself. I'm Nitin Gokhale. I work with NDTV and I generally look after reporting on the defense forces. I want to broaden this topic a little bit. When we say, do we care for our soldiers? And this is a topic after my heart, so I've just rushed from some other interview that I was doing. Thank you very much, Flags of Honor Foundation and Rajeev Chandrasekhar. Major General Surjit Singh, of course, he knows me. I just want to say this, it's not just the bureaucrats who are apathetic to the military. It's also the society increasingly over the past 30 years or so. And I link it to, or maybe 20 years, let's say, no, 30 years I would put it. Ever since liberalization has begun, and ever since the economy has opened up, what has happened is many of the people who would have actually gone into the forces as soldiers have started going into service sector and other sectors which are civilian and which are easier and nearer the house, nearer their own places. And subsequently, the standing of the military in the hierarchy of the society as well as in the government has just kept going down. I mean, if we take the case of the Sixth Pay Commission, which General Surjit Singh is also fighting for a long time, one has been associated with it quite closely. Unfortunately, none of us have been able to make any dent in the government as far as the perks or the status of the military is concerned, both for the officers and as well as for the soldiers, who we call fondly call Jawans. And wherever I go, and I've traveled, and that's been, I've been fortunate to travel right from Siachen down to Andamans and from Northeast. I lived in Northeast for 23 years, reported that region, and I know how the soldiers do a tremendous job that you spoke about. I've seen insurgencies there. And I must say this, that this is the contradiction I have not been able to overcome, or the dichotomy that exists in Indian society. When floods hit Assam, the army is the first one to be called in instead of the NDRF or the local police or the fire brigade. As a prince goes down in the hole there somewhere in Haryana, the army is called in. The other day, it was somewhere in Churu. Similarly, army was called in. But the same population, at the instigation of some of the interested parties, the vested interest in the Northeast as well as in Kashmir, will then start abusing the army. Now that's the contradiction I have not been able to overcome. And I must say this, that many of our politicians play the double game. On the one hand, they will say, oh, we love the army, we can't do without the army. And on the other, in public, they will say, we don't want. I've seen chief ministers in public in the Northeast saying, we don't want the army, the AFSPA can go, the army can go, we don't want it. In private, telling the generals, please stay here, don't go anywhere. That's the contradiction that we face. And the unfortunate part is the flogging happens of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, which is an empowering legislation. It's not a legislation which actually encourages impunity. I can give you figures, 130 people punished under the Army Act in the past 20 years in Jammu and Kashmir alone, including officers and Jawans. And 90% of the cases of human rights violation in Jammu and Kashmir over the past 25 years have been found to be untrue.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not, you can say, okay, I'm a Fauji kid, so maybe I'm a little biased, but to say that the army is works with impunity, army kills people with impunity, and just to take one example out of hundreds of other cases is actually a travesty of justice, and it's the last resort. Let's remember that. The army in this country, the military in this country is the last resort, last weapon of the nation state, and which we are weakening every day, every hour. Look at my friend Navdeep Singh, who fights the cases of the military veterans in Supreme Court. The government of India, the Defense Ministry, what is called the Department of Ex-Servicemen, have given a blanket order that such and such cases which are of disability pension and the pensions of the ex-servicemen should be fought in the Supreme Court. They are spending hundreds of thousands of rupees to fight cases against disabled soldiers in Supreme Court instead of giving them 100 rupees extra or 200 rupees extra. Now, that's not an attitude we want from the government. Unfortunately, I must also say this finally, and my last point here is that I must also blame the leadership in the military for not standing up when it is required. They always look for something post-retirement and keep quiet and therefore not protest. A very few of them are honorable exceptions, but most of them are looking for post-retirement sinecures and therefore never stand up to the government's unjust orders and unjust treatment of the military and the ex-servicemen. Thank you very much.
Very briefly, I'm going to give 2 minutes to Vinay Mudgil, and I'm going to time this because otherwise we're going to take away time from General Sir. But 2 minutes. And then the rest, please. This is going to be an open session at the end of it. So please, if you need to talk, preserve your questions. We'll get to you. Vinay Mudgil is where? 2 minutes, sir. I'm going to time you.
मेरे सभी देशवासियों, आप सभी को गणतंत्र दिवस की हार्दिक शुभकामनाएं। मेरा नाम विनय मुदगिल है और मैं परमवीर चक्र विजेता वीर अब्दुल हमीद की जीवन वृत्तांत पर फिल्म बनाने जा रहा हूं। मैं आपको बताना चाहता हूं कि फ्लैग ऑफ ऑनर्स ऑर्गेनाइजेशन पिछले कुछ सालों से अब्दुल हमीद जी के गृह नगर धामूपुर जिला गाजीपुर में उनसे उनकी जीवन पर, उनके जन्मतिथि पर और उनके शहीद दिवस पर हर साल बहुत सारे ऐसे प्रोग्राम करते रहे हैं और कर रहे हैं जिनसे लोगों को एक नए रूप में प्रेरणा मिलती है, युवाओं को, कि वो आर्मी में भर्ती हों और देश की सेवा कर सकें। तो मैं इसके लिए श्री राजीव चंद्रशेखर जी का शुक्रिया अदा करना चाहता हूँ और उन्हें बताना भी चाहता हूँ कि आज जो कुछ भी जिस विषय के लिए भी हम इकट्ठे हुए हैं, डू वी केयर फॉर आवर आर्म फोर्सेस, मुझे लगता है कि हम सच में केयर करते हैं और केयर करना चाहते हैं, बट कहीं जाकर के जो जिस तरह से एक दूरी है जनता के बीच में और आर्म फोर्सेस के बीच में, उसके लिए जो वॉर मेमोरियल का एक आपका जो आइडिया है चंद्रशेखर जी, वो बहुत ही बेहतरीन है। वो जाकर के लोगों के बीच में एक बंधन, अपना सेतु का काम करेगा, एक ब्रिज का काम करेगा, जिससे लोग समझ पाएंगे कि हमारी आर्म फोर्सेस हमारे लिए कितना कुछ सेक्रीफाइस करती हैं। और ज़्यादा कुछ ना कहते हुए मैं सिर्फ 2 शब्द में अपना एक कदम कर रहा हूँ भाषण, और मेरी शुभकामनाएं आप सभी के साथ।
Thank you, Mr. Mudgil.
We have a specific question here for Mr. Chandrasekhar regarding the voting rights.
Okay. Yes, actually,
that's for me actually. So, as you said, like now the citizens have to come forward to engage in the dialogue and get these rights to the army people as well. I very much welcome that idea. However, I understand the army institutions are very disciplined and we look them with pride. So, what is the stand of the army chief right now, Mr. Vikram Seth, I guess if the name is correct? So, what is their stand on this voting thing, and what is that main factor why it has not been progressed in the last 60 years, 65 years of independence? Because that is something where we'll find where is the pit hole exactly.
And so the army's position on this, I mean, from my engagements, everybody comes and tells me that the armed forces and the armed forces leadership is as keen to get the armed forces and their families involved in the democratic process. And I see no evidence to question that, except I think that over the last many decades, there is an almost unsaid, informal kind of feel within the armed forces leadership that it is best to keep the armed forces disengaged from the political process in the fear of politicizing the rank and file of the armed forces. Now, nobody has told me this, and of course nobody will confirm this, but that is the only way to explain the lack of, let us say, these 3.5 million families and members of the armed forces firmly guaranteed with their right, which is given to them under the Constitution like anybody else, to be able to place their vote during an election process. Now, excuse me, the answer for why it's not happening is a bit of a, I think this issue has fallen between the cracks between the armed forces as an institution and the election commission. Now, the election commission has, I think over the years, just taken a slightly less than intense view, or less than, I mean, a more casual view about this, saying, ho nahi sakta hai, bahut complicated hai, and in any case there is only a postal ballot. And since there are 10 days between the last date of withdrawal of candidates and the election, those 10 days are really not enough to do it. Now, I think what is coming out as a consensus now amongst the veterans and the armed forces is that the armed forces should be allowed to vote where they are based. So if you are one corps in Mathura, you will vote in Mathura. If you are based in Pathankot, you will vote there. Now, there will be, in my opinion, for the political class, some pushback on this, because especially in areas like Northeast and other areas, they will feel that this will alter the voting demographics. So I don't think it's as straightforward. I don't think we are making a fairly strong set of recommendations to the Chief Election Commissioner in the next few days, which will be very simply around the fact that where they are, the armed forces, and very well said by a few veterans, the armed forces don't need any special dispensation. They should have exactly the same facility and right as any normal citizen. If they are based in Hyderabad, they will vote in Hyderabad for the MP or MLA or corporator in Hyderabad. If they are based in Pathankot, they will vote for the representative there. So that is the idea. Let's see if what we couldn't do all these years, we are able to do it before the 2014 election. But it requires a huge process of enrolling almost 1.5 million people and aligning them with a constituency as of May 2014. That is not a trivial task, but the Election Commission says they can do it if they work closely with the army. So let's see. Yeah. No, I've heard that. Yeah. The argument against that is that this 10-day cutoff period. 1 month. So currently we have a limitation with this 10 days limit between the last date of withdrawal of the candidate and the election date. And so therefore the postal ballot, but I think there is a technological solution for that. You don't have to mail the ballot. You can have an email ballot where they print it out, get it stamped by a local unit returning officer and file it. So there are solutions.
No, I'm just saying,
yeah.
Like in the United States, the armed forces give a postal ballot.
Correct.
Until the postal ballots reach the Central Postal Commission, those seats are not published. So therefore we can do the same thing.
So
given
जयपुर से लिख दिया दिल्ली हेडक्वार्टर, दिल्ली हेड को ब्रिगेडियर बोलता मैं तो नहीं देता, मैं लिख के दे दो, लिख के नहीं दिया क्या करोगे? कोर्ट में जाओ। फिर पे कमीशन को मैंने चैलेंज कर रखा है, मुकदमा जीत के हाई कोर्ट में, उस टाइम ट्रिब्यूनल नहीं था, सुप्रीम कोर्ट में 9 जुलाई 2009 में एक्सेप्ट हुआ है। 70 साल की मेरी उम्र है, अभी मैंने अर्ली हेयरिंग के लगाई, चीफ जस्टिस के पेश हुआ, बोलता नहीं ये वर्क लोड बहुत है। अरे मेरे मरने के बाद फैसला आएगा तो किसको फायदा होगा ये बताइए आप। हम 71 के वार के आदमी, 15 आदमी वार डिसेबल, टोटल सीनियर सिटीजन, टोटल वार डिसेबल, सुप्रीम कोर्ट भी नहीं सुन रहा, एक्सेप्ट हो गया, जीत गए। तो इसके बारे में चंद्रशेखर जी आपको बताऊंगा। फिर कहते हैं ब्यूरोक्रेट की कमी है, बोलते हैं ब्यूरोक्रेट नहीं मानते, गलत है, बिल्कुल गलत नहीं है। ये राशन का लागू किया वोटों के लिए, एक दिन में ब्यूरोक्रेट कैसे मान गए? वोट लेने ये पॉलिसी एक दिन में कैसे मान गए? खाली एक्सक्यूजमेंट के लिए ब्यूरोक्रेट नहीं मानते, अपना वोट बैंक आता है एक दिन में मना लेते हैं जो पॉलिसी बनाते हैं। सुबह जूता मारते, मायावती जूता मारती थी, ब्यूरोक्रेट मानते, बंसीलाल ने 3 IAS सस्पेंड कर दिए, ब्यूरोक्रेट एक दिन में सीधे हो गए, प्रताप सिंह कौरों ने सस्पेंड कर दिए, सीधे हो गए। हमने रक्षा मंत्री को कहा, सेक्रेटरी, जोन सेक्रेटरी फाइनेंस से मीटिंग करा दीजिए, जायज फैसला कर दीजिए। है और नो टाइम बोलता, मेरे IAS नहीं सुनते, वो टेक ऑफ कोर्ट उसका डिसिप्लिनरी एक्शन लो। एक मिनट, मैं बोला हमारे फौज में हम कहते हैं नो कहते हैं क्वार्टर गार्ड में बंद, IAS को क्वार्टर गार्ड में बंद कर दो, आप बंद करो क्वार्टर गार्ड में। मेरे IAS नहीं मानते, मैं साहब गलत बात है मत बोलिए। हमारी इतनी बुरी हालत है, खास करके वार विडोज की। कानून में बहुत कुछ है, सारी डिटेल बता सकता हूं। लड़ाई मरेगा 2 बच्चों को नौकरी मिलेगा। पूरे इंडिया में आज तक 3 आदमियों को नौकरी मिली है। 1961, 71, 62, 65 किसी को नहीं मिलता। बोलता जो ऑन ड्यूटी डिसेबल हो जाएगा 40% घर भेज दिया जाएगा, 2 बच्चों को नौकरी मिलेगा। आज तक किसी को नहीं मिला। सतपीर साहब ने पहले कहा था मेरे एयरलाइंस में 60% डिसेबल, 100% डिसेबल नौकरी करते हैं। मेरी आंगली कटकी, क्या फर्क पड़ गया भाई, क्लर्क में लगा दो, रिकॉर्ड ऑफिस में लगा दो। फौज में 5% भी डिसेबल हो गया तो घर जाओ। अरे 5% में फर्क पड़ेगा क्या? आदमी कहीं का नहीं रहता। इतनी 1983 से काम किया हूं, हमें DA नहीं मिलता था, सुप्रीम कोर्ट गए। 2 फैमिली पेंशन नहीं मिलता था, सुप्रीम कोर्ट। एक बहुत अच्छा मैं की बात बताऊं, मैंने फौज में नौकरी की, एयरलाइंस की नौकरी की, मरने के बाद बीबी को 1 मिलेगी। अरे भाई क्यों मिलेगी? जब तुम ये कह सकते हो कि मैं राजस्थान विधानसभा में आक्षेप नहीं कर सकता, मैं बिहार विधानसभा में आक्षेप नहीं कर सकता, तो मैंने बिहार नौकरी करी है तो उसकी पेंशन वो देना, सेंटर की आपने देनी, दे क्यों मिलेगी? ये सुप्रीम कोर्ट में गए, क्या फौजियों को सुप्रीम कोर्ट ही जाने का काम रह गया? और कोई काम नहीं है। अरे हम रजिस्टर के निर्माता हैं, जात पात से ऊपर हैं, आपके आतंकवाद में काम देंगे, आपका भ्रष्टाचार में काम देंगे, हमारा सदुपयोग कीजिए, हमसे दुश्मनी मत लीजिए, हमको दुश्मन मत समझिए। सबसे बड़ी हमारे फौजियों में कमी है, 1265 संस्था है और 1265 के बीच में झगड़ा चल रहा है। हर हम एक नहीं हो सकते, और हम एक हो जाएं तो सरकार से 1 दिन में मना लेंगे। मैं बहुत अच्छे में बात बताता हूं, हमारे जनरल सतवीर साहब बैठे, गौरव कैप्टन VK गांधी, मैं वार्ड डिसेबल हूं 71 का, डिसेबिलिटी पेंशन ले रहा हूं, सर्विस पे, बोलते हैं ये एक्स सर्विसमैन नहीं ले रहा, ये पेंशन नहीं ले रहा। पूरे इंडिया में मैसेज भेज दिया। ये ऐसे हमारे आदमी हैं यहाँ पर, ये हमारे देश की हालत है। तो चंद्रशेखर जी कुछ MPओ का ग्रुप बनाइए। KPD सिंह जेब की कमेटी की रिपोर्ट 1984, रिकमेंडेशन 84 इंप्लीमेशन नहीं हुई। मदन लाल खुराना की रिपोर्ट इंप्लीमेशन नहीं हुई। आज तक 12 स्टैंडिंग कमेटी, इंदिरा गांधी जवाहरलाल के टाइम पर बोलते हैं कोई भी स्टैंडिंग कमेटी फैसला करता था तो वो सुप्रीम कोर्ट से भी बड़ी मानी जाती थी, इंप्लीमेशन होता था। आजकल कोई सुनता ही नहीं है। स्टैंडिंग कमेटी की नहीं सुनेगी तो हमारी कौन सुनेगा? सुप्रीम कोर्ट की नहीं सुनेगा तो हमारी कौन सुनेगा? हम क्या करें?
जनाब
कोई रास्ता है? धन्यवाद।
थैंक यू, बहुत शुक्रिया जनाब। ये गलत एक प्रोसीजर है भाई, एक आप जनाब एक प्रोसीजर इस एक हम
just 1 minute sir, please, just I want to bring you one important information.
Okay.
Sir, all defense personnel, they are sacrificing their best part of the life for the country, as well as their life for the country. Why they are being compared with the central government employees?
उनको आई थिंक सुनाई दे रहा है।
Why the defense personnel are being compared with civilian central government civilian employees? Why? They are serving in minor temperature, minus 30 to 40. They are using shoe and dress after 10 months. They are having fresh food after 10 months. They are serving on board submarine, on board ships where they don't get fresh air for breathe. Why they are being considered for comparing with civilian government, civil employees? Moreover, central government employees, they are serving in one place. They know only AC and heater. They don't know what is it, plus 55 temperature desert area and minus 50 temperature and on board ship submarine. They get, after retirement, they get developed lot of diseases like TB, cancer and Sonobite. Why they are being compared with civilian employees? You please note this and keep it, you put up in parliament also.
Thank you,
sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are we taking any more questions right now? Sir, after the panelists, please.
Sorry,
Sir,
sir.
sir, after
There
the
is a
panelists,
procedure.
please.
We will follow it. Shivani. Vikas, next one goes to Wing Commander Bakshi. Thank you.
Hi. I've been hearing a lot of stories. Some I've been quite familiar with. Some I have not been familiar with. I will stick to the discourse. That's do we, care for our armed forces, but also I like to say from a very engagement perspective. I run a community-based, mobile phone-based radio station in Northeast India, which is basically gives people the power to call a toll-free number, that's a mobile phone number, and record their stories about their community, about everything that they're facing. This is basically to make the media a little bottom-up from top-down instead of top-down. Which I've been talking to Deepa for some time, is that I don't see that from the armed forces. In the sense, I'm very proud of everyone from the armed forces and on the work that you do. Of course, there are rogue elements in every part of this world, and I think in the army there are. But what's happening is that we only hear about the bad side. Like, if there's some problem, some encounters, we only hear about that there's civilians been killed. We don't get to hear stories, real life stories from the armed forces, from the Javans. 1 minute, ma'am. Sorry. Yeah. We don't get to hear that. I come from a very humble background. I washed cars when I was a teenager. And I met ex-servicemen who were there. And I used to be very shocked. They're like, oh, we don't get jobs after we finish our role in the army, BSF or paramilitary. And I used to think, why? Like, why is this happening? So again, as I grow up, I see that division broadening up, right? I only see, there's this whole disparity. It's only like during Operation Vijay or something like that. People, my batch, people of my age becomes very nationalistic because the media portrays it. But after that, it dies down, we forget. And again, coming from a very engagement perspective, I see this is widening. And to very answer that question, of course, I heard about Uttarakhand, but I also I know people who haven't heard about Assam floods. Every year there are floods, and the army takes a pivotal role in the rescuing operations, right? But if you go back into the Northeast, again, how many people actually know? Like every year, floods in Assam devastates communities after communities. Brahmaputra is changing. It's taking away land after land. Asia's largest river island, Majuli, is going to go away in 20 years, right? But army plays a big part. Where our civilian government, our political leaders don't even go, the army goes. Make sure the people are alive, they're fed. But then what do we see? We see only negative information coming out of the army, right? Why can't we build a system where we get news from the soldiers on the front line, real life stories? Who are they? I want to know them more better. I want to know you, all of you, better. So, of course, this country wants to know you better. But why we can't we do a system as simple as a mobile phone-based radio system? If everybody in the front line has a mobile phone, I was reading this news where the government said, don't use WhatsApp, don't use Facebook, because it's security, it's a security problem. So why can't we get news directly from them and, get those news out in the mainstream? I just came from Ladakh in September after a 3 weeks visit. Same thing on a radio perspective, asking people what they think of a community news service like this will work. And trust me, and of course you guys know more better than me, is that people said, oh, the second largest population in Leh is the army, and glad that they are here, we are safe. And that made me very proud. And then I was talking to them as saying that, do you engage with the army here? Do you talk to them? They're like, yeah, we are very safe. We talk to them. We sometimes encounter, and they're very nice, polite people. But then again, we don't get the stories, right? And again, coming from a very engagement perspective, I will ask Rajeev ji also to think about this one. Like, I'm no one, actually, you are doing all the work. But on a very engagement perspective, I'd love to, try out some of these modules. Maybe if there's security issues on the front line, government doesn't want you to talk. Maybe when people retire, my knowledge is very, very simple. I don't know. I don't think there should be any curves on that. Talk about your stories, something like where you call a mobile number. Like all these grievances you have, 90% of this country doesn't know, right? We only hear about American war veterans because of all the war. But what about our army veterans? We don't hear about them, right? And this is, again, I think it's a human rights violation. Coming from a very human rights perspective, I think that's a very large human rights violation. You spend half of your life defending our borders so that I can sleep well, I can go to school well, I can do all my stuff. When you retire, you said, go home. We don't want to do anything for you. And I think that's where, from an engagement campaigner, I think that's where the work starts, is to bring out your stories on a simple platform like a radio platform. Talk about you. And then again, whether you want to vote, I think the political class doesn't want you to vote for the simple reason is that, they doesn't want you to vote. And telling our armed forces that, they will become politicized and that means saying the armed forces, we don't trust you. And I oppose that act. I trust my armed forces, and of course I trust every one of you. And again, coming from a place like Northeast, I must tell you also that when I talk to my Northeastern friends, and they are real life stories too, that there have been a lot of atrocities on that. And I think those atrocities needs to be addressed so that our best armed forces can be looked into a very bright light, which we always do, but due to few elements, we don't do that. In case of, there are many cases, I won't bring that. I know this is a very sensitive issue, Armed Forces Special Power Act, and I'll stick to the discourse here. Again, I think at this point of time, trust me, I don't know what the mainstream media will do, because I only get to hear when there's a war or when there's some atrocities, or I won't say atrocity, when there's some encounters, some civilians are killed. I only get to hear that. Why? Why don't the army why don't the military or even the mainstream media talks about cases like Uttarakhand? Uttarakhand we get to know because there were so many people who died, and about all that. What about Assam? What about floods in Bihar? It's always the army who plays a pivotal part, but we never get to hear that. Again, coming from an engagement perspective, I think together with the army veterans and decision makers and our politicians, member of parliament, I think this is something we should all talk about. Thank you. I won't take much time. Thank you.
As I said, I'm going to ask Vikas to pass the mic on to Puneet Bakshi. He and 4 pilots were among the first respondents at Uttarkashi. Although he's a wing commander that served in the Indian Air Force, they were all civilian choppers in the first 3 days. Please put that on record.
Thank you, Omer. First, I would like to start with saying that I am a retired wing commander, and while I was in Uttarakhand, I was in my capacity as a freelance pilot. And I was flying variously for civil companies which were incidentally there commuting the pilgrims from Fata to Kedarnath. The question here is not about Uttarakhand, so the main topic here is about, do we care for our armed forces? And I think we are asking the wrong questions and giving the wrong answers, all of us. The reason is that we had the General Saab have a very passionate speech about the wrongs that have happened and how the government and how the people variously look at us. And he told us about the court cases that are pending in various courts and in the tribunals. And I have had I won't say the opportunity, but I had been through a litigation in a more direct way. And one thing he is not saying, the General Saab, is that the person who's standing up against you is the JAG branch from your own organization. So the problem is that when you put up a case in a High Court or a Supreme Court or in a tribunal, the organization itself stands up against you. It has got nothing to do with the Ministry of Defense, at least directly. So where is the answerability coming from? If your own people turn their backs against you, then what do you do? So I think the single pointed direction in which we can all look up. I have retired as a wing commander, which is a middle level seniority post in the Air Force. I can tell you that when you look at situations head on and you see where is it wrong, and for most of us, at least the most of the people on the field, the answer is very, very simple, that the organization top leadership has failed miserably. And it has failed miserably to address the situation that they were well aware of and that they have lived all their lives through to get there. This is not an organization where an officer cadre at a major general gets there suddenly. He starts right from the beginning and gets there after 30, 35 years of work in the field. And don't tell me that they do not know the problems that confront them, but they don't do anything about it. And there are two ways of looking at it. One of the ways is, they are incapable of, because they bow under the pressure of the bureaucracy, the government, the circumstances, the finance ministry. The other way to look at it is they were not passionate enough. They were not. They did not stand up for their own fellows. They have never stood up. They continue to have this helplessness about them. The moment we all retire, we start cribbing. Any Fauji gathering, people will tell you, ends up like a crib session. I am 42. I got commissioned at 21 to command men into battle. And in my case, I was a pilot, so I didn't get to command so just the machine. But believe me, it will embarrass me when I stand up in a gathering to ask for sympathy votes about my welfare. If I am to lead men and if I am to join a service where I am to lead people, I rather stand up for them and their rights, and rather than shout at the top of my voice after giving my entire life away about the pension that I was supposed to get, because it was a given. That was what I was told, it's a given. If an officer has to go and crib, where are we really? We are nowhere. And we are asking just the wrong questions. I want just one more thing, just a brief, we talk about human rights and human rights violations. Does anybody know what is the rights of the soldier in a democracy when he joins the armed forces voluntarily? Does anybody know that the soldier also has a right to leave that armed service at any moment he wants without any further ado? He has to be let go, and the maximum time that you can hold him back against his will or against his request is 6 months. And this is not some mumbo jumbo, this is a law passed by the International Labour Organization. Yet there have been at least 50 decisions in the Delhi High Court and the Supreme Court that have stopped their own men from leaving. And who has stood up for this? Nobody. And this is just a farce. So on that, I think I will not take too much time.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks. I think there's also Ankit Gupta, Citizens for Forces in the audience, who wants to speak. Ankit, yeah, please.
I'm coming to you, Ankit.
Can you just wait for... Sir, after this, please, that gentleman, and then I'm going to transfer it back here, okay? After you. Please keep it short, keep it a question.
So, I'll speak in Hindi for the, so that people will understand it clearly. मैं राजीव सर का सबसे पहले शुक्रिया करना चाहूँगा. सेकेंड टाइम उन्होंने मेरे को और मेरी टीम को यहाँ इनवाइट किया. पहले एक क्लोज डिस्कशन में भी थे, जिसमें हमें काफ़ी ऐसे चीज़ें पता लगी विच आई वॉज नॉट अवेयर, जैसे कि 40 ईयर्स की सर्विस में भी लोगों ने वोट नहीं दिया हुआ था. उसके अलावा वी हैव बीन फॉलोइंग राजीव सर उनके इंडियन मिलिट्री मेमोरियल के लिए भी, और अब्दुल हमीद के लिए भी जो उन्होंने एक पहले किया था कर्नाटका में. सो वी आर रियली ग्रेटफुल टू देम. सर 3 or 4 थिंग्स मैं एड्रेस करना चाहूँगा जनरल सतबीर सिंह को एंड जनरल मलिक यहाँ पे बैठे हैं. सर जैसे कि सर ने बोला, मैं इनकी प्रॉब्लम बिल्कुल एंडोर्स करना चाहता हूँ. ही हैज़ मेंशन द नंबर 12 इन ESM. लगभग इतना ही डेटा मुझे जनरल वीके सिंह ने भी बताया था. And when you have such a divide among the ESMs, how can you expect that ki aapke problems solve honge? So this is my question to the all senior journals, all senior officers sitting here. With all due respect, please be on a common platform because you have a common issues, right? So there is no point. I've been working with the journal for the past 3 years, and higher you go up in the ranks, the more is the divide. That is number one. Number two, what sir has just said, right? This is a very, very, very important concern. Nowadays, the whole country, during social media campaigns, and once Sachin got retired, everybody was like, Bharat Ratna for Sachin, right? What about the NSG team who fought at Mumbai? That is number one. The soldiers are alive. What about the PV Manish who is battling? Allopathic has totally refused to, treat that person. So there are few concerns. Our NGO has been very proudly sponsoring his treatment. That is number two. And I would request Rajeev sir, please raise this issue. Please continue your good work in the parliament. And General Malik and General Satbir Singh sir, please bring all ESMs together so that we can, thank you so much.
Vikas, the gentleman in the cap.
Yep.
And then we are going to move back to give Preeti a call, and then we'll open it up to interaction. After that, you can ask as many questions as you want. Please.
Sir, I'm Commodore Nath, retired from the Indian Navy. We are really honored to have Shri Rajeev Chandrasekhar with us. And I have been reading what he has been writing to the Prime Minister, the copies and all, and he's one of the members of Parliament who has really taken a lot of interest. And as he said, that he's son of a Air Force officer. As a matter of fact, his father was the course mate of Admiral Malhotra, who's sitting next to me. They did the National Defense College together. The point is this, that where are we actually heading? Do we really care for our armed forces? Now, as General Satbir Singh has said, that the people of India definitely care. You go anywhere, there was a lot of respect. But there have been a lot of vested interests. The civil-military relationship problem has been in all countries, whether it is USA or England or anywhere. But why it has been solved is because of the learning and knowledge of the political leadership of that country, who know what the defense forces are about. President John F. Kennedy served, Lyndon Johnson served. These people have served and have seen war, and they know about it. Unfortunately, none of our political leaders know anything about our armed forces. That is the thing. And therefore, taking advantage, the bureaucrats who are hungry for power, and as I said, there is civil-military rivalry anywhere, they have taken this to their advantage. Till such time, our political leadership takes control and understand what the armed forces are about, and they are aware as to where we are heading. Are we going to head for some disaster someday? That is the question which they are not aware of. And I am sure the Parliament is bringing this to the notice of the other members of Parliament and the political leadership, that please come to understand what the armed forces are about. Every country is proud of its armed forces. And here you have seen the anger which is now growing slowly and slowly. Where it's going to lead to, we do not know. And that is what we should be worried about.
Thank you, Commander. I'm going to ask Mr. Chandrasekhar and General Singh to speak briefly on a lot of these issues which have been directed right at you. Do you want to speak now, and then we'll ask? No. However you wish to do it. Okay. All right, Preeti, why don't you take it?
Good evening. Thank you very much for having me here. I think I stand out quite a bit from this August gathering here, especially on the panel, because one, as a woman, and two, as someone who has the least amount of experience or understanding of the armed forces. But, I belong to a group of people who've been quite lucky and who've had the privilege to be protected by the armed forces and not have to worry about it much. But this much I can tell you, as I grew up with absolutely limited connection to the armed forces, I did grow up with a sense of awe, a sense of pride with what you're doing. And I want to start by saying I'm very humbled to be here, and thank you very much for all that you've done. I'm here representing change.org. I bring a slightly different perspective to everything that we've been talking right now. I work on trying to see how it is that we can mobilize people and get people to be more engaged in the whole process of democracy itself. Change.org is an open platform. It's a platform, a petition platform where people can raise issues of their concern, mobilize people around it, and ensure that there is accountability from bureaucrats, from politicians on all of these issues. In the last 2 years, we've seen with just 9,000 people using the platform to close to 1 million people only in India using the platform to raise issues. Several petitions, more than hundreds of petitions every month. But unfortunately, very few or almost nothing about armed forces. I remember one for Manish where they were asking for Ayurveda to be included in the medical reimbursement for armed forces. But beyond that, I was just sitting here listening to the stories that were coming from the audience, and I'm very shocked to hear about that and see that there isn't much out there for the public to know or hear. Puneet, I understand where you're coming from, and I think that's a very valid point, but I would humbly beg to differ, because I think for people who put so much of their life out there trying to protect the country in such harsh conditions, there is a certain level of accountability that the government has, and it has a responsibility to take care of them and ensure that, one, there is a space for such grievances to be addressed and solved, and two, for it to be solved quickly and to ensure that they are taken care of, so that there are no such situations where these kind of issues are raised. Which is why I'll keep this very short. I'm very happy today because as the election approaches, one of the first petitions or campaigns that have been started around the elections 2014 is the one started by Rajeev Chandrasekhar asking for voting rights for the armed forces. You all have a copy of it, and I'm sure will be supporting it. I would like to congratulate him and hope that this is just the first step, starting from voting rights to moving on and address, for our armed forces, or along with civilians, to start raising issues that are of concern, mobilize civilians who are anyways concerned and would love to support you, and to pressurize our government to be accountable and solve the problems that are there. Thank you.
So I'm going to the issue of political leadership, and let me just say this. I mean, I completely relate to the anger and the anguish. I am by nature not a very, I don't put it out there, and I'm not as emotional as I should be. So I may be underplaying the issue, but believe me that I feel as passionately about this as you do, if not more. Because I believe in the right and wrong of an issue, and I know what is right and I know what is wrong. I completely agree with Commodore Nath. I think one of the realities is that the political leadership of this country, and not just the current incumbent, I think successive incumbents, have really, really let down the cause of the relationship between the country and its veterans and serving armed forces. So let me be very clear that I believe in that concept absolutely to the bone, that it is the fault of the leadership for letting this come to this situation. Having said that, I think the solution for this is really about engaging with the larger audience in India and getting them to understand and taking these set of issues to them. Because as Preeti said and Shibayan said, they are also coming to know this the first time. When I started this a few weeks ago, I got the same sense from youngsters and college students and young professionals saying, how can this happen? isn't this absurd that you have people who have served the nation who have to now go out there and cry and plead and beg for what is legitimately owed to them by the nation? So that's point number one. So I think we should, as a strategy, and for all of those who are civilians here, I urge you to start engaging on this problem, on this challenge of getting the issues that are really making the veterans and armed forces really anguished, getting that and talking more about it, and as elections come, maybe bringing that into the old discourse. The second, Nitin said this, and I think he's left. The Ministry of Defense has covered themselves with glory on many, many things. But the piece of cake, or the piece de resistance, is this order in recent days saying that every disabled soldier's claim will have to be fought up to the Supreme Court by the family. This is, if there is something shameful, and if there is a garland that you want to give that says, you are what you are, this takes the cake. And I just recently saw Robert Gates, who was the Secretary of Defense in the US, and talking about his book called Duty. And he was discussing this on one of these talk shows. And they asked him, what is one of your most vexed and what are your biggest challenges? One of your biggest challenges. And he said, this issue of handling disabled veterans. So it seems to me that everywhere, bureaucrats have a natural tendency to push back any claim made by a disabled veteran. So the Indian bureaucrat is not unusual. But the difference between the US, UK, and India is the political leadership there steps in and understands what is right and wrong. And they have evolved a model where they don't let the disabled veteran fight the case. The onus is on the establishment to prove that his claim is wrong, and do that not by fighting the case in a legal process, but by creating empowered groups within the Ministry of Defense that can then adjudicate that dispute in a very dignified, seamless, and fair manner. So you don't have this painful process. As it is, the judicial process in India can make anybody old and grey and wanting to do things to himself or herself. And on top of that, you take this very grounds of total compassion and turn it on his head. So I think this is clearly one of the most disgraceful things that the Ministry of Defense has done in recent times. And they've done, and they have a serious track record of doing things that are disgraceful. So this one's really the gold standard on that. So I would again say the following, which is that there is no doubt in my mind, that the country is pretty sensitive to and will stand by its veterans and its armed forces. It's now the issue of making sure that the engagement we've done in the last 2 decades. And if we can work together on that, there is anger, there are divisions, there are various opinions, and I always say if I meet a group of veterans, of 5, I will get 10 views on what I should be doing, which is fine. I'm happy to do that. But I think if we can coalesce and consolidate around, like you said, get all the groups together, Citizens Forces says, get the groups together, make the agenda and the engagement between the people of India and the veterans and the armed forces the way to go, then I think political leadership will have no option but to start listening. And that is really what they know. Political leadership listens to the people. And they have a very innate, inbuilt sense of survival that makes them react very quickly to what a group of citizens start talking about. So that should be our focus. And the absence of any other strategy, that's the focus that we should be placing, which is to engage with the country at large.
Yeah. Okay. May I? Please. Right. Just 1 or 2 points. Yeah. After the Kargil War, there was a committee which sat, and that committee, after the Kargil War, there was a committee, Subramaniam Committee, and they gave out 4 very important recommendations. Now, all these issues which have come about, because those 4, not even one has been actually implemented, is also the cause are also the main cause of things happening wrong. First one, which was very important, was creation of a central CDS. Two, reorganization of defense ministry. If railways can run with technocrats, there is no one from the IAS in railways. I'm sure we can also run the defense ministry. Initially, 6 joint secretaries were recommended to be posted from the serving officers in the Ministry of Defense. You will automatically see that if that happens, then that empowerment to the Chief of Army Staffs and the Chief of Air Staffs and other things will also come, because they would understand what is right or wrong. And now it takes time. All the letters which we have written they come back by remarks from a desk officer. And that's what happens. Reorganization of Defense Ministry with large number of serving officers, it was actually 70 to 30. 70 defense officers and 30% civilians, wherever they want some intelligence or something to be put down there, has not happened on ground. The Chief of Army Staff, Air Force and Navy to be on the decision-making loop of the government, which was there, which was also recommended, has not seen the light of the day. CDS, in any case, though required, has not come about. And last one was procurement of equipment to be transparent. Those are the 4 major. Of course, there were 4 more recommendations, because I happened to be at that particular time in IDSA, Institute of Defense Studies Analysis, a senior fellow, and all this were compiled because he was our director, Subramaniam, and I have been closely associated with it. Gentlemen, in case that is done, you will find things will work for the good. After all, who are these chiefs and everybody wanting to do his duty properly? And they had to be armed, both in leadership and equipment. And that they cannot take decisions because of ABCD reasons. So I think if we can engineer that movement, that these 4, that committee report must be put down on action immediately, would be the way ahead to set the defense forces systems right. Ankit ji, I totally agree with you that we are 365 or even more. There is a definite need of being together. Efforts have been made by various people at various angles. For reasons, again, our own systems, we've not been able to do that. But what we are now coming to, that if you can't merge as one, can you just work out some merge as an agenda only? Yeah, you decide 10, 15, 20 points, and based on those points, you come together, all of us. I think this is catching time now, I think, into focus. If that even happens, I'm sure things will work out better. But we continue to attempt at that, totally agree with you. The one point which was put down there that is the reasons chiefs have not been able to do. Yes, they have not been able to do because of this lack, because they also wanting to look at the system as such that but if you do the reorganization of Ministry of Defense and put these things to right, I think this is the answer to sort out some of the problems which the armed forces is in. And last but not the least is the civil-military relations, which are awfully gone down. There's a lack of faith everywhere. Here is a case which we have taken up recently. In Gurgaon itself, there is a secretary of Soldiers Board who's got 22 years of service as commissioned officer, lieutenant colonel, who's come back. And there's a deputy commissioner with 7 years of service. He's called and rebuked. And therefore, this gentleman went out and he said, I don't want to serve here as a secretary, just because he's got a re-employment as a secretary. And DC is supposed to overall do that. We have written a number of letters to the Chief Minister and everyone, but it's not seen the day of. So there is a civil-military relations, a lot of things to be done over there. I think little earlier days when IAS officer used to stay put 2 months with the defense people, I don't think so that's happening today, even where the people used to go. Even the media who used to spend that so-called, our war correspondence and so-called the military correspondence, which we used to see, are not happening today in that much spirit as it should be. Thank you.
We have 15 minutes to wrap up. I'll ask for a round of questions because we'll go around with the mic. This gentleman has been asking for the mic for a while. Then this gentleman next, and then.
Okay. He got something to say over here.
मैं श्री चंद्रशेखर जी को एक सूचना देना चाहता हूं कि 365 में से एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन पूर्व सैनिक सेवा परिषद भी है, और इसने 2003 में या 2004 में अरुण शौरी शहरी विकास मंत्री जब वो थे तो उनको अप्रोच किया था, तो उन्होंने कहा कि मैंने फाइल में नोटिंग दे दी है, अगर कोई इस फाइल को देखेगा तो उसको ये देने में जब काम करने में आसानी होगी. फॉर योर इन्फॉर्मेशन प्लीज.
He is talking in regard of the National Memorial. Okay, who's next? Okay. Sir, I'll come to you after that. Thank you.
गुड इवनिंग. मैं वीर बहादुर सिंह हूँ, हवलदार रैंक से रिटायर्ड हुआ था और वॉइस ऑफ ऑल इंडिया सर्विसमैन जेसीओ जवार का नेशनल कोऑर्डिनेटर हूँ. सर, मैं थोड़ा सा आपको वी केयर फॉर आवर आर्म फोर्सेस, वी केयर फॉर जवान्स के बारे में कहूँगा. एक पॉइंट मिस आउट हो गया है जिसकी वजह से आज के जवान नौजुवक डेली मरते हैं, फिजिकली नहीं मेंटली मरते हैं. वो है सेवादारी प्रथा जो अंग्रेजों ने शुरू की थी हमें लेट डाउन करने के लिए, कि सोल्जर्स होते थे इंडियंस और वो होते थे अंग्रेज. मैं फौज के सर्विस के दौरान कई बार मरा हूँ मेंटली, जब एक मेम साहब बैठी होती है और उसके गार्डन में मुझे गुड़ाई करनी पड़ती थी. तो ये सर आज के डेट में आपने देखा होगा कि बहुत लड़ाई होगी है अफसर जवान के बीच, ये नेशनल इंटरेस्ट में ठीक नहीं होगा. मैं स्टैंडिंग कमेटी ऑन डिफेंस में प्रेजेंटेशन भी दिया था और स्टैंडिंग कमेटी ऑन डिफेंस ने इसको कहा भी था कि इसको तुरंत बंद करिए, तो इस चीज़ को तत्काल बंद किया जाए. दूसरा, हम जो जवान हैं सिर्फ ब्यूरोक्रेट द्वारा नहीं ठगे जाते हैं. आई एम सॉरी टू से कि हम सेना अधिकारियों द्वारा भी ठगे जाते हैं. मैं आपको सिंपल सा उदाहरण देता हूँ, ये बेसिक पे नहीं है, दो बारे में बताऊंगा. एक एमएसपी के बारे में, मिलिट्री सर्विस पे आर्मी हेडक्वार्टर की वेबसाइट पे जो वर्ड लिखा हो वही वर्ड मैं आपको बता रहा हूँ. ये पेंशन में भी शामिल है हमारे. मिलिट्री सर्विस पे हैज बीन इंट्रोड्यूस in recognition of entangled difficulty experienced by armed forces personnel during their entire career. जब सबसे ज़्यादा परेशान जेसीओ जवार रैंक है तो इस रैंक का एमएसपी 1000 हमें पेंशन मिलती है. नर्स की 4200 रुपया जो कि कहीं जाती नहीं लड़ाई में, जो कोई परेशान नहीं होती, और अफसर्स को 6000. ये बेसिक भी नहीं है. दूसरी बात आपको मैं बता रहा हूँ हमारे साथ कहाँ कहाँ धोखा दिया गया. जब तीनों सेनाध्यक्षों ने ये कहा था कि हम पे नहीं लेंगे, हम फिफ्थ पे कमीशन पे ही काम करेंगे, उनकी 3 मांगे मुख्य थी जो मीडिया में आई थी. जेसीओ जवार का 70% पेंशन जो कि थर्ड पे कमीशन के समय था इंडिया के अंदर. अमेरिका 70-75% से 100% तक देता है. एबीसी कमेटी बनी, उस कमेटी के रिकमेंडेशन के ऊपर 6th पे कमीशन की रिकमेंडेशन थी कि लेफ्टिनेंट कर्नल 15,000 से 20,000 के स्केल में समथिंग था. लेकिन चूंकि उस रैंक को हर अफसर बेनिफिटेड हो, इसके लिए एबीसी कमेटी बनाई गई है. 12 साल में आज एक मिलिट्री अफसर पे बैंड 4 में पहुंचता है. पे बैंड 4 पहुंचने का मतलब 34,400 से 67,000 के स्केल में जाता है. 8,000 ग्रेड पे, 6,000 मिलिट्री पे, 54,000 डीए, 1 लाख से ऊपर जाता है और सर्विस से छोड़ के कैश ही हैंड लेता है. हमारी स्थिति यह है कि हम 35 पेंशन में लेते हैं और हमारा जो जवान होता है जो 5200 के स्केल में है, 22 साल बाद कोई जेसीओ बनता, सब जेसीओ नहीं बनते. तो आफ्टर 22-23 साल बाद वो 9,000 के स्केल में पहुंचता है. हमें सेवा करने का कम मौका मिलता है, तो हमारी पे भी कम होती है और हमारी नेचुरली पेंशन भी कम होती है. और ये ना होने की वजह से डेली हम मरते हैं. आप ग्रोथ रेट अगर देखें मरने वालों का तो आप इसमें पाएंगे कि मीगर पे है, मीगर पेंशन है. ये 35,000, 5200, 5300 जवान, सिपाही, नायक, हवलदार की पेंशन है. ये सरकार हमारे साथ अपमान कर रही है, घोर अपमान कर रही है. हमें ना देखिए, हमें कुछ नहीं मिलेगा जवान को. ब्यूरोक्रेसी और अफसर के लड़ाई में हमारा नाश होगा, मिलिट्री अफसर ब्यूरोक्रेसी की लड़ाई में. धन्यवाद सर.
Can you please keep it short?
Yeah, short. I am Colonel Handa, President of the Disabled War Veterans India. I've got 3 points. One is in response to what you started right in the beginning about why your wife had not come here. I'm sorry, I'm answering that point. If a CBI inquiry says A is guilty and it goes to a civilian court and the civilian court reject it, like in the case of Mayawati or Mulayam Singh Yadav, have the whole country arisen that this is Zaiti, मतलब जब CBI ने बोल दिया कि वो गिल्टी हैं, तो why is the court letting them off? Now a court martial has let off those people in Patribal, and the entire government is, the civilian establishment is after them. The General Jamwal said on the TV, and this was not allowed to be continued when he was questioned, that the whole summary of evidence is available. If in that summary of evidence you find that a wrong decision has been taken, you can go to the High Court, you can go to the Supreme Court. So why condemn the services just because those people have been let off? Now that is the answer you can give your wife. The second question is that as far as the disabled are concerned, as what he said over here is absolutely true. They have been neglected. Every case has to be fought on their own. I have cases of the Chinese war. People have been disabled. That is in 2001, I think. Before that. And then there are people who fought in the this Bangladesh war. Till today, they have not got their disability pension. I have been fighting their disability. Why? Because somewhere along the line, the Part 2 orders, which is known as the casualty return in the armed forces, have not been published. So there are so many issues, as Sadhvir has pointed out, and the disabled people have got to fight on their own. The most important is that the pension regulations, armed forces, have been changed by the Ministry of Defense totally without taking into consideration the Sixth Pay Commission or the subsequent decisions of the Supreme Court. They've been changed without arbitrarily, and the people who are going to come in the future are going to have another lot of court cases going because the 2008 pension regulations are totally different. Mr. Harbans Singh, who has retired, he is being paid from the flag money that is collected from the Jawans and the officers. Very few civilians pay on the flag day. It is the armed forces themselves who are paying 8 rupees, 10 rupees, 100 rupees, whatever, for the flag fund. And from that flag fund, he is being paid about 65,000 rupees a month and a car and everything else to come to the office. And that money that is for the flag fund is supposed to be used for the welfare of the disabled and the veterans and the war widows. So these are the things that the politicians should look at and the administration.
Anybody got a question and not a statement? Okay, that guy has asked first. I'll go to him. Okay.
First of all, Happy Republic Day to all of you. I have a very simple question. My question is to Mr. Singh as well as to Mr. Chandrasekhar. My question is, sir, general, as a civilian and as a IT professional, I'm not much related to armed forces, but I keep myself involved out of my own, curiosity and what you call the drive. So my question is very simple. I want to know that people, when you listen to people talking in the streets, they say that there is no, India has a very strong military will. But when it comes to the political will of this country, that's the place where we are actually lacking. So my question to Mr. Singh and Mr. Chandrasekhar is it true that our political will of our Indian political will does not complement the Indian military will, and is that the place where we could actually rectify it? Taking all our citizens along. Thank you.
No, so the question is the political wing aligned to the military will? I think the answer is yes. I think there isn't a person in this country who thinks that there is a politician or the majority of the politicians don't think too much about the. No, look. I have a view. I've been maintaining this view from 2006 when I first entered Parliament. There are two ways of looking at our political class. One is to complain about them, or the second is to take a jhadu and clean them up. I mean, honestly, there is really. I mean, I've tried advocacy and partnership and engagement with politicians. I mean, I've done so much of it. The reality is, yes, the political class is a class that responds to clamor, noise, crowds, mobs, and therefore votes. The armed forces has been an organization that believes in dignity. It believes in saying things softly, saying things the right way, and unfortunately, that model of engagement with the political class doesn't get them anywhere, as is evident. Now, that doesn't mean I don't believe that the armed forces should start getting noisy, clamorous, and start losing the dignity and decorum that they are famous for and that they are admired for. I think that is where we should step in, you should step in, and say, these, by the way, are our armed forces. These are people who serve us and our nation. If some clown who's a politician doesn't get it, doesn't respond, doesn't do the right thing, we will engage, we will make them respond. You are now seeing clear evidence that politicians are scrambling, and I know this from traditional politics, they're scrambling to catch up with the changes that are happening around them. The Delhi elections have proved one thing to all of these legacy politicians, that if you stop listening to people, you will find yourself minus a job. So this is the point that I want. This is the reason for these engagements, which is to get the non-veteran class of India, which is the citizens of India, using platforms like change.org and the radio network and every other platform, social media included, to start telling the politician, excuse me, you've done enough damage, you have damaged, you've caused people to be unhappy while they are doing a good thing, and we want this to stop. If I can get 100,000 people on change.org saying what you are saying today, or saying what I'm saying, I can guarantee to you there will be a lot of attention within the political class on this issue. We have unfortunately taken the wrong approach, and I say this because it's not wrong as much as we took it, because that is what we believed was the right way of a dignified engagement, meeting MPs, telling them, making presentation. General Satbir Singh has gone from being a very polite, I've seen him evolve from a very polite, understated, dignified general to now wanting to kick the backsides of many politicians. So I don't blame him, because I feel the same way sometimes. But the only answer is, and this is what we have learned in Delhi, we have to fix the political mindset, not by crying, not by whining, not by wringing our hands, but taking the battle to them and saying, do this or else.
Just take 30 seconds to. Yes, political, you asked a question. From my side, we also said the same. I also say political leadership has been lacking, and till date it is lacking. How? Otherwise, how do you explain 4 steps down in your status of defense military since 1950? You are 4 steps down, and who's done it? It is they who have accepted it. If the political class leadership had said, we will give 1 rank 1 pension, how is it that it is not accepted in spite of the 10 MPs of the Rajya Sabha having strongly recommended for sanction of this?
Yes.
The third point, in 1973, the pension of a Chief of Army Staff was 1,000 rupees. Why is the pension of a civilian senior most officer was only 416 rupees paisa 50? This is 73. It's all recorded. It's given in the army, the rules and regulations. And we have obtained it through the RTI. In 2006, the pensions of both the chief and the chief secretary are 45,000. It means while the defense chief's pension has been increased 45 times, that of the chief of the civilian has increased 108 times. Why this has been allowed, how it can happen without the political leadership being weak and somebody else getting their way through. So the way ahead is again, yes, it is lacking. If all of us now get together at least for those points, and push it, and said very rightly that it will be very difficult for the political class, even for the bureaucracy, to refuse you once we are all together and we get help from our civil brethren, which you are doing it as it is, and a bit more from the media. Somehow that's what requires to be done. Thank you.
I'll ask, I'm Commander B.R. Sharma here. Happy Republic Day to all present. My question starts from the basic thing that our services leadership itself is very weak, which is not able to representing the cases of service officers. Just give one example, Major Dhanpalan's case, which is now a landmark in our army circles. Where was the support from the service headquarters? Only in the very end, Air Chief Brownie supported it, that they should be given. Till today, that is not implemented. If we can't get an order which is issued by Supreme Court implemented fully till after 23 years of service, where is the service leadership? And my feel is that service leaders who are coming are very weak. They are not representing. We are not getting leaders of the type Admiral Ronnie Pereira, who had said the things much better earlier. The leadership which is at the helm today is very weak, and I don't expect things will change if we continue to get the same kind of leadership which is assertive and putting their foot down. They are not putting their foot down. That's why things are happening. Is there an answer to that?
Can I ask a question from here?
I'm sorry, this will be the last.
Okay. Can I ask a question then?
There was a. Okay, yeah. Please go ahead if you have the mic.
So, my name is Virat Bhatia. The question that I am an army officer's son, so I want to put that out right up front. The question that I had, it seems, जितनी भी बात अभी तक हुई है, including जो शरण साहब ने कहा है, उसके बाद तो कुछ there's nothing left to answer this question about do we care about our armed forces. The answer is a big fat no. But agar so that argument is settled for the day. Thank you, sir. The point that I wanted to ask you was that part of the problem, it is very clear that if you can keep 15 lakh people out of active voting by one way or the other, then why should the politicians care about you? That's a very simple point. So first, very clear step has to be to get voting rights, to make sure that the politicians start and take notice. Otherwise, you're actually nobody, whereas the politician is concerned. The second point I'd like to say, which is the bureaucracy issue, which is, we've just seen that External Affairs Ministry just brought us to a brink of a diplomatic sort of war on one of their own in the last few weeks. I don't think Army would have ever done that because of the discipline that they have. But the question is, should retired Army officers be more involved in the administrative decision makings on the pensions, pay and benefits, medical, in the Raksha Bhavan and the Defense Ministry, so that some of those decisions are more pro-officers? Because right now, the Babus are making the decisions, including sometimes buying guns and aircrafts. Is that one issue wherein neither the expertise nor the sympathy lies in the bureaucracy? Is it possible that we should make a move to try and see if immediately retired senior officers and other ranks, I don't want to say this only for the officers, are involved in actual administrative decisions which impacts the serving officers and the veterans? Will that help?
Thank you everyone for your questions. मैंने सबको सुना और बड़ा अच्छा लगा और बड़ा पैशन भी फील हुआ आर्मी ऑफिसर्स में. दो बातें मैं कहना चाहता हूँ. पहली बात तो ये कि जो भी ऊपर लोग बैठे होते हैं, ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में ऊपर बैठे हैं, किसी संगठन में ऊपर बैठे हैं, वो हमेशा जो भी नियम बनाएंगे अपनी सहूलियत के हिसाब से बनाते हैं. और किसी शायर ने खूब कहा है कि संसद आवारा हो जाएगी अगर सड़कें खाली हो जाएंगी. मैं देख रहा हूँ कि हमारे बीच में जितने भी नौजवान, बोलूँगा मैं आपको क्योंकि आप में पैशन भरा हुआ है, अच्छे रिसर्चर्स बैठे हैं, अच्छे फौजी बैठे हैं, तो आप लोग इकट्ठे आइए, हम सिविलियन आपके साथ हैं और ये लड़ाई इस रूम से छोड़ के हम जंतर मंतर पे जाके लड़ते हैं. क्योंकि अगर हम इसको ले जाना चाहते हैं, एक्चुअली हम डील करना चाहते हैं, 1265 नहीं 12 ऑर्गेनाइजेशन साथ आइए, 12 प्रायोरिटी इश्यूज लीजिए जो एट मास एंडोर्स करते हैं, हम आप लोगों के साथ करेंगे. आई थिंक जितने भी मेरे नौजवान फ्रेंड हैं, और प्लीज देयर इज नो पार्टीशन बिटवीन द सिविलियंस एंड आर्म्ड, इट इज हैंड इन हैंड, इट सप्लीमेंट्स. हम नहीं है तो आप किसको गार्ड करोगे, और आप नहीं है तो हमें गार्ड कौन करेगा? तो देयर इज नो डिफरेंसेस. जो सही है वो सबको मिलना चाहिए, वो सबको मिलेगा. और कॉमन इश्यूज है, शायद इसीलिए जैसे सर ने कहा कि झाड़ू चली, एक एनएसजी कमांडो सुरेंद्र जी, उन्होंने भी दिखा दिया कि हाँ फौजी जब सड़कों पे उतरेंगे तो अंदर भी सेना हिलेगी और ब्यूरोक्रेट वाले भी हिलेंगे. तो यही कहना चाहता हूँ सर, आइए आप, हम लोग आपके साथ खड़े होंगे. थैंक यू वेरी मच सर.
So Virat, let me take your question. So I think on a common sense basis, it makes sense. You will get a much more compassionate response if there are people there who understand what people are going through. But and this, in a sense, is related to the question of weak leadership of the armed forces. There is very little that a uniformed or a veteran within the MOD can do if there is a circular signed off by the Raksha Mantri that says all disability challenges should be appealed all the way to the Supreme Court. So you may have, like I said, I'm not condemning all bureaucrats. I'm sure there are compassionate people in the Ministry of Defense, even though it may be difficult to find them. But I'm sure there are some there. So the issue is not that. It is the institutional outlook and the relationship between the political class and the armed forces and the veterans. You look at the US, you look at the UK, you find the National Security Advisor as a ex-Marine Lieutenant General. You find people in government, in the positions that are directly accessible to the Prime Minister and the national security leadership. You have people who are veterans, who are serving officers. There is no paranoia or fear in the political class there engaging with and utilizing the armed forces or a veteran in their team. So this is something that we have to evolve institutionally, and from a mindset point, we have to get there. We are not there. You know, I have a view on this, and I may be, sorry, it's just my view, so I may be permitted to say this. The problem with strong leaders is that this definition of strong seems to be about visible assertion. The definition in India seems to be that you're only strong if you make a noise about your strength. I have met a number of chiefs, and I believe they're all very strong people, but they are working in a system, and they are in a sense governed by their own sense of dignity, duty, and they define for themselves how they wish to engage with the political class. I understand that, but and like I said, I am not the chief. I've never had a friend who's a chief, but I only meet them occasionally, and I get a sense that they're all very honorable men who are in a sense being defanged. I'm using this word lightly, but defanged by the political class that has now put so many restrictions on them that the moment an army chief says something, the next thing you know is there's a headline in the Indian Express saying there's an attempted coup d'etat. You know, so I find, yeah, so I don't think it's as simple as that is my point. Yeah.
That's
all three CNCs were behind him. Next government sacked Admiral Vishnu Bhagat. Next man was ready to take over. Where is the caution in the services itself?
If that happened, then why is it that we have gone down four stages? They are the ones who are responsible for it.
I think this is a discussion. I think we can have over tea. Yeah. There is tea outside. We can have this discussion. Yeah. I don't think this discussion is over. I think there are multiple discussions. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your enthusiasm. Thank you for your